best flower our Colombia is Atlea. The best flower for this Congress is Dr. Wendy Gardner. Dr. Wendy Gardner, terapeuta respiratorio, registrada con bachelor degree en administración, analista clínico para gases arteriales, Siemens Healthcare Diagnostics. Dr. Wendy Gardner is the best flower for this Congress. Come here.
Good morning. Thank you for having me here. My lecture today is going to be on emergency and disaster preparedness. Are we ready? A lot of what I'm going to present to you today is information from the States, information that's going and things that we're putting together in the United States. So the first part of this lecture, since it is 2 parts, is going to be ventilators and other equipment. Objectives, we're going to discuss and have a better understanding what types of disasters should we be prepared, both nationally and regionally, and this should also say internationally. As respiratory care practitioners, what should we be most concerned about? Which should be in high demand and short supply? What is happening nationwide? What about locally? And then there's a call to action, especially for RTs that have not been very involved in the disaster planning portion. What can we do to improve our readiness? So again, what types of disasters and emergencies? Nationally and locally, natural disasters, pandemics, hurricanes, earthquakes, 50-year floods, and severe tornadoes and high straight-line winds. Here in Colombia, you don't have to worry too much about the tornadoes or the hurricanes, but you did just have an earthquake that could affect a lot of what's going on. Okay? A big part of my presentation is going to talk about severe tornadoes and high straight-line winds because we have been very affected in the United States by this. All right. Other emergencies, both accidental and intentional, chemical releases, internet cyber attacks, terrorism, bioterrorism, and nuclear or radioactive releases. As you look at each one of these, they can happen absolutely anywhere. And this is something that was demonstrated or that was talked about in the St. Louis region, disaster preparedness in 2007. These are things that have happened in the area. All right, so our biggest risks, and again, this is talking in the United States, chemical spills, pandemic flus, earthquakes, severe tornadoes, cyber attacks, floods, bioterrorism, and nuclear detonation. The 4 here at the top are going to be the 4 that I'm going to discuss. So the top 4 probable disasters, as you look at this slide, it talks about the probability of each, the loss of life in the first column, or in here, talks about immediate, and then per year, what they're looking at. So they look at patients who have been sick, who are in the hospital, don't lose their lives immediately, but may lose their lives within that top year. Numbers that are not included in this are numbers of suicides after these potential things happen. And then again, the economic loss. So for chemical spills, 6% probability, highest probability, a lot of industrial areas. Talk about 300 lives lost immediately with 5,000 in the first year, and $30 million in economic loss. Pandemics, 4.67%. And again, you're talking flus. Any type of flus that could happen. Major earthquakes and severe tornadoes. Any United States, tornadoes are a big issue, and I will have several slides on here as we go through that show the severe disaster that happened in the state of Missouri, where I'm from. In that particular tornado, the thought was there was only going to be an initial loss of life of 10 lives, with 250 total within the first year, with 38 million economic loss. What actually happened in one tornado was 116 lives lost immediately, 162 within the year, and there was actually $1 to $3 billion worth of loss within that first year. So let's look at some pandemics. Avian flu was a big issue, especially around 2006. Anybody here have any patients with bird flu? With the avian flu? No? What about H1N1, the swine flu? Yes? Pretty significant loss? Yes? Did the patients die from H1N1 or did they die from the associated pneumonia and ARDS that set in? H1N1 is very near and dear to my heart. I actually lost a 31-year-old cousin with no other comorbidities from the severe ARDS that she encountered from the H1N1. So again, that's huge loss. So with the avian flu, one of the things in 2006 came out of bird flu pandemic that created shortages of ventilators in hospitals. Okay. And again, Dr. Schaefer from Emergency Medicine in San Diego, California, printed out this report. As an RT, how many times do you run 60 to 80% of your ventilators on a daily basis anyway? Then you add the pandemic in there, or just a normal flu season or a normal pneumonia season, you increase that to maybe 90% of your ventilators. Now get the pandemic. A medium level flu pandemic would likely cause between 89,000 and 207 deaths, and about 314,000 to 734,000 people will be hospitalized in the United States alone. A large percentage of those hospitalized patients could be critically ill and require a ventilator. Again, when you're running at capacity of the ventilators you have in your facility anyway, add to that a pandemic, and now you're really in problems. And doctors may be faced with picking who gets life-saving treatment and who shouldn't. Not a decision I would want to have to make. There are some people that think greater good for the greater number. Who are we going to treat first? Am I going to treat the young person who has a full life ahead of them, who's incredibly sick, or am I going to treat the older person? So again, a lot of discussion in the United States has started to happen since 2006 of who are we really going to take care of. One of the other things that they're thinking, should one of these pandemics hit, are we going to take care of our staff members' families first? Because we know, as RTs, are you going to function at full capacity if your families are sick or not being treated? Are you going to work as well? So again, Dr. John Pegg, South Hennepin County, Minneapolis says, healthier patients versus sicker patients, the greater good for the greater number. Not everybody agrees. All patients have fundamental rights. And again, the decision has to be made as you start thinking about disaster planning, what's going to happen? What type of patients are you going to work with? So here we go with H1N1, swine flu. According to the CDC website, in 2009, the World Health Organization actually raised this to a level 6 pandemic because it was so widespread. 70 countries being reported, 41,000 hospitalizations, more than 2,000 deaths. 58% of the cases were under 18 years old, 277 pediatric deaths of those 2,000 deaths. And again, a lot of these patients did not have other comorbidities. They died from the resulting, or got very ill from the resulting pneumonias and ARDS. So, as healthcare professionals, as RTs, thinking about running these ventilators and having ventilator shortages, we're going to have a look at supply of healthcare professionals trained to manage ventilators. Dr. Sullivan covered this some already. We have a lot of countries that are running ventilators or have people who are hooking patients up to ventilators who really have no training. So you need to have something that's very, very easy for a lot of people to use. In a major earthquake where buildings are crumbling, there's not going to be enough of our SRTs to be around to lift every single patient up to a ventilator. You've got to have something that's easy to use. Non-critical care trained healthcare workers will have to be utilized. Again, we may be there to help check, but you may not be the initial one seeing that patient. Again, the ventilators must be simple and easy to use, and those non-critical care trained healthcare workers should receive basic training in mechanical ventilation. Again, you must pick a ventilator that's very simple to use. Right? There has to be some alarms to minimize healthcare worker exposures. So what's being done? Looking at this. Again, in the United States, we have stockpile of mechanical ventilators. The Federal Strategic National Stockpile has put in 2,000 LP-10s. Has anybody here seen this old LP-10? It's a typical volume ventilator, pretty easy to use, but again, if you're having somebody who is not trained in mechanical ventilation, it's not the easiest thing to use in the world. It's very easy to hook the circuit up, but you don't have somebody who knows how to set tidal volumes, who knows what rates to set, what peeps to put, if they that positive expiratory pressure. They also have the Univent Eagle Vent, again, which is a very nice ventilator, but not all that easy to use. The other one here, they do have over 12,000 LTD 1200s. The LTD series of ventilators was actually set up as a disaster prep ventilator because it has a startup menu that asks you, is this a new patient? You tell it yes. Is it a pediatric patient, an infant, or an adult? And you select which type it is. I like to say it then gives some I couldn't kill you if I tried settings for those particular patients, but again, very simple to use so that non-trained person can actually go and set that patient up on a ventilator. They took this ventilator to a shopping mall, doing some research and development with it, and selected randomly 20 people out of the shopping mall to see if they could set that ventilator up. 100% of the people that they selected, no healthcare workers, were able to set the ventilator up within 5 minutes with the appropriate settings, with the appropriate patient settings. The only problem they had is they had one person who put a pediatric circuit on instead of an adult circuit. Would still ventilate that, just not optimal. So again, you've got to have something that's easy. Of the LTD 1200 Go Packs, this is what they look like. In the United States, they've shipped these out all across the country. We don't know exactly where they went. We just tell everybody if they show up at the hospital, let us know there's all kinds of training. And this was actually the letter that went out from the AARC to all facilities saying, here's how we're going to do training. We're setting up this web-based training that you can access at any time. So what about on the state level? And just as we're looking, this is where I live. So how do we make good decisions? You have to have careful planning with an emphasis on matching ventilator performance to patient need, and caregiver skills is the best choice to the appropriate stockpile choices. And again, that's Richard Branson, and it was in Respiratory Care in 2008. Not all ventilators match every patient. You're not going to put a pediatric patient on an adult ventilator and just hope. California Department of Health Services purchased 2,400 LTD ventilators for California's health surgery capacity. There's 4,800 patient interface kits, and that's talking about the circuit for the patients. They have equal amount of pediatric circuits as they do adult circuits. Okay. The Go Packs, which I showed before, those Go Packs, and again, I should have shown in here, there's filters. There are these pediatric and adult circuits. There's a training video, and there's quick setup cards here. So again, the Go Packs are packing for storage and deployment, provides a single box solution for a ventilator with all of the prerequisite components and patient interfaces. The only thing that is not in those boxes are suction catheters. New York State Department of Health purchased more than 1,700 LTD 1,200 ventilators. They deployed already 500 units to regional hospitals. The remainder are remaining in a national stockpile. So when a disaster happens, they're able to pull it to where they need to go. The reason they put them in regional hospitals is so everybody would know how to use them very quickly and very easily. Again, the Go Packs there, ready to go. Hospital units configured for immediate ICU use. Every site received clinical training, and there's programs to cover in-use and depot units. These ventilators have to be serviced every 2 years, and it's something that they will rotate through. They have the information on the serial numbers. Homeland Security. The following states have installed LTD ventilators as part of their Homeland Security initiative: Arizona, California, Colorado, Washington, D.C., North Carolina, New Jersey. The list goes on. There are more than 7,000 of those LTD ventilators that have been installed, again, because of their ease of use. The unique needs of each state have been addressed, and that was one of the issues that they wanted to make sure was taken care of. They wanted to make sure that everybody is comfortable with being able to use that ventilator and set it up very quickly should the need arise. And again, clinical support, training, continuity of care, and service support that is available with those ventilators. Illinois stockpiles. They have the LT10, Univet, LTD 1200s, and Versumets. Other than the LTD 1200s, most of the other ventilators they did not receive training on. They said they would get to them, they sent them out. Some of them have quick cards, some of them have online. So again, there's a wide variety per manufacturer as to what they provide to each site. One of the other training tools that became involved, the Illinois Emergency Medical Services for Children got involved. And Loyola University is a very big university hospital in Chicago. They decided there was not enough training out for pediatric patients. There was not enough training on the ventilators for pediatric patients. So they also got involved to make sure that those patients are taken care of within ventilators for strategic national stockpile. My lovely state of Missouri, when this first started, they originally purchased only mechanical resuscitators. The old core trainer. Has anybody ever seen this? It's a pneumatic ventilator. It has no alarms. It has no settings. You literally have to hook up oxygen to it and twist the dial to get approximately the pressure you might want to have. Again, no alarms, no way to tell if that's exactly what's happening. And they're oxygen pumps. So, I always ask in the state of Missouri when I give this presentation to them, do they have theirs or do they know where it is? They are in boxes someplace in a hospital, usually in the basement, and nobody knows where they are. Nobody knows how to use them. And what was their plan for monitoring? Again, there's no alarms. There's nothing available for them. And what's the plan for oxygen supply? With a small cylinder of oxygen, you would blow through it in less than 5 minutes if it was completely full. So not a very good plan for those hospitals in Missouri. Again, they did not have respiratory therapists on the disaster planning committee. They did ask for our input, the nurses gave it to them. Okay? That has changed within the last couple of years. So in early 2011, Missouri got RTs were asked to become involved. They realized that our plan, quite frankly, stunk. Okay? In July 2010, they purchased 221 Newport HD50s and 26 Impact Eagles. That's what these ventilators look like. Again, they purchased them based off of funding that was available. They wanted to get the most number of ventilators that they could with the money that was available. So again, pretty easy setup, single circuit, but again, if you don't have somebody who is very well trained in ventilators, you're going to have an issue getting some of these set up. Logistics, the ventilators are stored with the Missouri Disaster Management Team. The deployment plan is currently under review. They're working to make sure that they're able to get these ventilators where they need to go. And DMAT is going to be primarily responsible, and that's the disaster management team, is responsible for deployment and training. They did a trial run with that just-in-time training for people. It was held in April of this year, and there were a couple of lessons learned with this training. They did decide that they needed to have 2 different training sessions, one for nurses and other staff, and one for respiratory therapists, because RTs ask a whole lot of different questions than what the nursing staff does. One of the other lessons that they learned was they need to look at their boxes a little more frequently, because when they opened the boxes up of this particular ventilator, every knob was correct. The ventilators were still functional, but every knob was correct. So again, there was a couple of things that we realized we need to do better. And it is things that we just constantly review. Training opportunities, plans are currently under for just-in-time training at hospitals upon deployment. Again, the disaster management team will be responsible to train those sites when the sites when the vents are deployed. Newport HD50 demo was given at the Missouri Respiratory Care meeting in May of 2011. It was opened up several times for anybody to go through. And again, it's the respiratory show. So they tried to pull in as many respiratory therapists as they could for that. The Eagle training, which they promised when they sold the ventilators that they would provide training for all of the RTs, they have yet to schedule that. So what other equipment's needed? You have to have adequate supply of ventilator circuits, heat moisture exchangers, suction equipment, pulse oximeters must also be readily available in order to maintain airway clearance and monitor oxygenation. Again, as we started to review our disaster plan, Missouri had none of the suction machines, no suction catheters, and no oxygen, no pulse oximeters. So it's something, I don't know about you, but I'm not putting my mouth on somebody's inventory building. In a disaster, we've got to have the equipment that's available. So we talked about ventilators. What else should we be concerned with? Oh. Oxygen supply and personnel are on that in the next part of this lecture. Thank you very much. For additional oxygen. So what are you going to do with that long-term oxygen use? What if the hospital's piping system were to fail? How long are your tanks going to last? And if everybody, especially the students, know how to do those tank calculations to figure out how long those tanks are going to last. But if you're using them as a high-pressure source for your ventilators, how long are they really going to last? Because some of them you cannot calculate that information. Who's going to haul the tanks to the patient's bedside or the alternate care site? Because as an RT, I want to be at my patient's bedside. And I may have 5 or 10 patients, maybe even more than that, in the disaster that I have to see. I don't have time to go haul tanks around to the patient's bedside. What about patients on home oxygen with long-term electrical outages? So those patients in home care with concentrators, now if their power would go out, they can't use those concentrators. They only keep a limited supply of oxygen in the home of tanks. What are they going to do? Now they're going to overwhelm the hospital system to come in for their oxygen supply as well. So there's a couple different systems that are out there available for hospitals, for alternate care sites. First one that I'll talk about is called the POGS, or the Portable Oxygen Generating System. It is a portable oxygen concentrator. It actually pulls from air, concentrates it, and then it will put into a typical H cylinder, into the gaseous form. In the state of Missouri, they own 2 of these. One of the things to look at is with a typical oxygen concentrator, they don't get 100% oxygen. You're lucky to get 92 to 93% pure oxygen out of them. So they can also only provide 33 liters per minute of 93% oxygen. So if we own 2 of them, we can only provide 66 liters of oxygen per minute. I don't know about you, I've got a lot of patients on HOMO2. I don't think that's going to be enough just for that patient population, let alone somebody who comes in and needs a non-rebreather mask or needs a ventilator. It can fill an H tank in approximately 3.5 hours, but not while it's using supply. So again, not a great system when you're talking about disaster preparedness for these patients. So that 33 liters or 66 liters a minute with both of them going is totally non-functional if you wanted to fill the tanks for the patient's bedside. Another product that's out here is called the Mass Oxygen Distribution System, or the MOD system. There is a 75-liter liquid oxygen system on board that they can keep in tanks. They can keep full with liquid oxygen. 75 liters of liquid oxygen is the same as 14 H tanks. Much easier to push this around than to carry those 14 H tanks around. No external power needed. From the top of the machine here, will produce 450 liters per minute. It has the capability of connecting to up to 70 patients at one time with different flow needs, whether it be a ventilator, a nasal cannula, or any type of oxygen mask. There are audio and visual alarms for low quantity of oxygen within that onboard system, as well as low pressure and low temperature. The thing you have to worry about with low temperature is ambient temperature when it comes through here. So my liquid system is here. It turns to gaseous as it goes through the coils, just like in a typical hospital system. And then it's room temperature by the time it comes out. The reason you have to be worried about a low temperature alarm with a liquid system is that it's pouring too much gas too quickly. Now I'm going to pull liquid system, or liquid gas, all the way up and through to deliver cold gas to my patients. Your COPD patients, that's a big issue, right? So again, here's that onboard liquid system. And again, this is the exact same liquid system that the militaries use for their fighter jets, just on a much larger scale than what's in those planes. So again, different box configurations. Here's the machine that we were talking about, 450 liters per minute flow. Can come out of one of these. You can hook the VGLs, or variable gas liquid systems, to the back of it and run them continuously. I didn't show a picture with them there, but they actually hook to the back. So this can be for that first immediate need, and then the back once it's sustained. So again, we hook these PDKs, or patient distribution kits, to this, and you can run 10 patients off of each one of these kits, and you can hook up to 7 of them up to this particular system. In the St. Louis area, we have a hospital that just purchased one for their disaster prep setting. University of Missouri actually purchased one for their, or 3 for their disaster prep, because their alternate care site is going to be at the college, at the Hearn Center at the university. And then Carbondale Memorial, this Region 5 disaster team purchased one for their alternate care site, which is actually in an airplane hangar at an old airplane, because they know that they're not going to have enough patient beds. and they're going to be able to take care of a ton of patients instead of just one off of the tank. Healthcare personnel considerations, we discussed this just a little bit before. We know that there's not going to be enough RTs to get around to see all of those ventilator patients, to get all of those oxygen patients. So how are you going to train them? You have to have equipment that's going to be easy to use. One of the things that I like to show everybody, the state of Missouri has developed a system called the Show Me Response Team. It's a volunteer group of healthcare professionals of every healthcare profession that sign up for this, again, on a volunteer basis. And if there is a disaster anywhere, they can give you a phone call, and you can volunteer then to go to wherever the disaster has happened to help take care of the patients. So it's one single source to be able to pull a ton of people from to take care of those patients. And again, it's everybody. Talking about care settings, again, what are you going to set up? We all have a limited number of ICU beds for our patients. Now the disaster happens, where are you going to take all those patients? Is there another hospital close by that will take on your patients if their ICUs aren't full? Are you going to put them on a different floor within the facility, within that hospital, to set them up? Or are you going to set up that alternate care site? We have a couple of different situations. Again, I talked about the airport hangar, where they were going to set up patients in a setting like this to be able to set up all those patients. We have universities that have ICU-type beds where they have their RT schools, their nursing schools. They have fully functional ICU-style beds where they're going to set up those patients. And that's what happened in the state of Missouri when our tornado hit. So again, hospitals' beds are in limited supply. Alternative mechanical ventilators will be used outside of that traditional ICU setting. Is it going to function in that traditional ICU setting? Does it only work with 02? Can I use an alternate source of oxygen to power this? Can I use low flow? Ventilators with alarms, battery power capability, and ability to use both high and low oxygen pressure sources are needed. Again, we've already looked at all of those different ventilator types that are out there. You have to have a plan together. You have to have something ready to go for those patients. Do I have the right patient? Or I'm sorry, do I have the right staffing? Do I have the right equipment? So it's all about having the right equipment, the right people, at the right time. And again, that's why we put together our disaster plan for the state of Missouri. That's why we developed that Show Me Response plan, so we can hold many people from many different areas into one particular area. And do you know what your hospital's plan is? If the disaster were to strike the hospital, you lose your piping system of oxygen. You've got 15 ventilators running. What are you going to do besides panic? So here are some pictures of what happened in the state of Missouri. We actually had an EM5 classified tornado that had sustained winds of greater than 120 miles an hour have a direct hit on one of the largest hospitals in the area. We had 116 deaths in that tornado immediately. There were several patients' loss of life out of the hospital because their sickest patients, their ICU patients, couldn't be moved because of the equipment they were on or the medications they were getting. So they pulled them as far away from the windows as they could. But the hospital took a direct hit. It moved the hospital 6 inches off its foundation. I don't know, I always thought I was in a mighty fortress being in one of these great big buildings, but this just proved it wrong. As you can see here, this was their helicopter. This is what was stationed on site to move patients quickly. It ended in a pile, along with everything else. So, again, there were hospital beds that they found. There were hospital beds that they found outside, maybe 200 yards away from the hospital, that were just thrown. Of course, unfortunately, there was loss of patient life, but they would find the patients outside the hospital as they were pulled from the building during the tornado. And this is just what the rubble looked like afterwards. But every window in this building was blown out. Would you know how to act? Would you know what to do with your patients at that time? Again, the next disaster could be in your area. We as Missouri respiratory therapists decided that we needed to help our friends that were directly affected by this. Some of the things that we did for them through the Missouri Society for Respiratory Care and the AARC to help them, we had 35 RTs that were affected. 10 of them had total loss of their homes. A couple of them that I talked to had taken containers or boxes to their homes where they were and were able to fill up one box. All they could get left out of their homes. So the best that we could do for our non-A members, we gave them $120 gift cards to be able to take to stores to be able to get supplies that they needed immediately. And they got a free AARC membership for a year. For members of the AARC, they got $200 gift cards, as well as help from the rest of what was going on. We also collected money off of t-shirt sales. And here, the New York Disaster Response Team of RTs donated $1,000 to the cause to help these patients. So it wasn't just our state that was devastated and us trying to help our own RTs. There were RTs across the country who were helping other RTs. So here is another look at that hospital situation. In these pictures, this is a group of respiratory therapy students who actually went to go help clean up after the tornadoes were through. MU is the University of Missouri. They have a bachelor's degree respiratory program, and the director of their program, Sean Strickland, actually took them on more than 2 occasions to help clean up, to help do what they could do. The patients were already taken care of at that point, but there were a lot of people that still needed help. Lessons learned. The education coordinator from respiratory at Mercy Joplin, the hospital that I showed you, the top 3 things that they wish they had available for their patients, shoes was the #1. The ER physicians spent more time sewing lacerated feet than they did anything else from all the patients that they had to walk through the rubble of the hospital. What's the first thing we do to our patients when they come in? We strip them down, we put hospital gowns on, we take their shoes, and we put them in bed. Go move. Now move on once that tornado hits and try to get them out of the building. So a lot of feet that were cut. Flashlights was the next thing that they wish they had. Again, very dark, you're in the middle of a tornado. And then the biggest part here, we wish we'd had more oxygen. Again, trying to get the right equipment at the right time for those patients. There were not enough tanks in the hospital to get to all the patients. So again, are you ready? Whether it's a tornado, unfortunately, our big disaster in the United States with the terrorist attack, earthquakes, biochemical. Anybody know what this one is from? Smallpox. Again, more tornadoes. And again, in the United States, the biggest issue being the tornadoes and fires. This is a view of inside Mercy Joplin just after the tornado hit. One of my RT friends sent. Again, the ventilator. There's IV poles that are down here, more tubing, the patient bed, and everything blown out. Can you imagine trying to get your patients out of this room if they survived it? If they survived that direct hit. This is the mobile tents that were set up within 2 days from the American Red Cross in the parking lot of the hospital. They function as a full-service hospital. They tried to take care of as many patients as they could through this particular hospital. There's one other hospital that's in this particular area. They took as many patients as they could. The rest of them were bused more than 60 miles away, or they set up the alternate care sites within the university. Okay, any questions? Thank you.
Do you have a question, Dr. Gardner?
Terapeuta Respiratoria de Medellín y siempre me ha parecido muy interesante y preocupante el tema de las armas biológicas. Entonces la pregunta es la siguiente, pues ella que está en Estados Unidos y hubo antes y todo lo demás, yo quisiera saber de qué manera enfocan el perfil o el rol, por ejemplo, un terapeuta respiratorio, además de la prevención o de hacer conciencia que la gente sepa que hay armas biológicas que atacan y comprometen la salud, sobre pandemias. Entonces hay temas más de tornados y pues más biológicos, pero en cualquier momento todos estamos expuestos a liberación química o biológica.
More supportive as far as the chemical attacks. There are hospital systems that have the masks, so you can. I actually had a picture up there of the gentleman in the full bio attack suit with the mask on. So there are those. They will put up tents for that particular instance where they will have to wash down patients, but you have to protect yourself at the same time, and they keep them sequestered from other patients that could possibly come in. So it is a real possibility. At this point, it's pretty low on the radar screen in the United States, even though we know it can happen. We have much more chemical spills than biological chemical attacks.
Entonces, sí, de pronto la pregunta. Sí, se llaman equipos Hazman y también existen acá en Colombia. Y se hace lo mismo, el protocolo cuando el ataque ocurre, sí, pero mi inquietud va más hacia la prevención. O sea, ¿qué hacen los terapeutas para, no sé, frente a sensibilización o algo de, por ejemplo, la H1N1, es una pandemia, eso suena muy loco, pero no sabemos qué pasó.
Not that I know. There may be education that they're working on with that particular piece of it, as far as education for the RTs on prevention. Biggest form of prevention with the viruses, hand washing. Is it droplet spread? So again, you have to look at that. How is that particular piece spread? Hand washing still the best.
Y usualmente en los congresos estatales siempre hay una de las jornadas específicas para prevención de transmisión de enfermedades. Entonces se trata de involucrar al terapeuta a nivel educativo o en los cursos que nos da la Asociación Americana. Pero así como coordinada de prevención, no. Simplemente el Departamento de Infecciones le envía a los hospitales a la enfermera que está coordinadora de la salud de los empleados, hay epidemia, hay un virus, y ellos nos mandan los protocolos de qué debemos hacer para prevenir. Por ejemplo, con cuestiones de la gripa, en mi hospital lo que hicieron fue mostrar a nivel de afiches todas las precauciones que debía tener el visitante y el empleado y el paciente para prevenir que haya transmisión. Entonces, pero así como campaña que se conozca pública a nivel nacional, no.
Y tengo otra pregunta, que pena, la última. En la conferencia habló sobre los equipos de los concentradores, por así decirlo, de oxígeno, pero líquido. Pues en Colombia apenas ahora algunos los pueden tener. Digamos, ella habló sobre el EPOC, dijo que estaba contraindicado o era muy cuidadoso en utilizarlo con pacientes con EPOC. Yo quisiera saber, pues, por qué, y si pasa lo mismo con los pacientes que tienen, por ejemplo, fibrosis quística, porque veo que en Colombia lo están mandando para los que tienen fibrosis quística, tal vez por la comodidad del transporte, si hay alguna contraindicación, no sé por qué tienen la experiencia.
Ella estaba hablando más que todo enfocada en la temperatura del oxígeno y que puede ser utilizada para cualquier paciente.
Thank you very much.
Sí, esa es la pregunta.